All right, I have 6:30. All right, let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much.
One more person join.
Hello, somebody just joined the city council meeting, wanted to know if you wanted to speak during citizens' comments. You're not muted. It says CHAL fan trees. If you would like to speak, could you just say something right now? Okay, we'll check again later. All right, with that, roll call. Mayor Tammy Kaufman is present.
Summer Madison, position 1.
Chip Bradley, position 2.
Anthony Pagano, position 3.
Councilor Campbell is absent. Councilor McGilvery, are you still here?
Yeah. Is that better?
There you go.
Position 5.
All right, and you're the starting vote tonight, by the way.
Yes, I noticed. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Sadat, are you present?
Yes.
And
City Administrator Jody Fritz.
okay, thank you. Councilor Campbell messaged just ahead of time that she wasn't feeling well tonight. All right, we have an addition to the agenda. We had a planning commission member resign, and I bumped into Rebecca Moore via emails and asked her if she would be willing to volunteer to fill that position, and she said she would. So I would like to do an interview with her tonight. If the council would like to ask her some questions. I think a lot of you already know her. She's been a longtime resident. I think she went to school with Councilor Bradley. And so I will start with Councilor McGilvery.
There we go. Mute again. Rebecca was on the board with Wally's House at the same time I was, so I know Rebecca, and we'd be delighted to welcome her.
Awesome. Thank you. Councilor Madison.
Hi, Rebecca, and thank you for applying for the position. What are you hoping to accomplish in serving on the board?
Well, I'm not exactly quite sure yet what the goals are, but I do know that sitting where I sit and seeing what I see every day, that I really have been working my entire life to promote Gold Beach. And there's a lot of stuff that we can do to make it better. And, you know, for instance, the old Dairy Queen is just sitting there. I get to look at it all day long. And that's just one of many buildings that I've seen in town that would be nice if we could get something done with them.
I know you're very proactive in the community, so I just want to thank you again for volunteering for the position. I think you'll really like it.
Thank you.
Councilor Bradley.
Hey, Becky. So
Right.
I told you I was going to hit you with one. So most of us here do know Rebecca from other places, but people who might watch this video in the future might not know. Can you give us a little bit of your background on and why and your ties to the Gold Beach community?
Well, I was born here and went to school here, worked at the hospital for 20 years, retired, sat on the board for a little while. My husband, who I was married to for 20 years, was also born here. We moved away for a couple years after he passed away. and moved back, joined the board of directors at Wally's house, and went back to work in real estate with Karen. And throughout the 20 years at the hospital, we did a lot of campaigning. I remember the very first one was when we needed the new roof. And we were out in Pistol River knocking on doors, trying to raise money. And that's just the way it's been for as long as I can remember. Longer than we've been doing that longer than I haven't been. So that's all I remember.
Thank you, Ms. Moore.
Cool. Thank you, Councilor Pagano.
Hi, Rebecca.
Hi, Anthony.
I've known her for several years, so I have no questions. I think she would be a great asset to Planning Commission. Thank you for applying.
All right. It sounds like everybody's asked their question. Does anybody have a follow-up question before I move on? Okay, so I'm going to appoint Rebecca Moore to the Planning Commission, assuming the council approves. This is going to require an ordinance because she'll be the second person that is not in the city limits, but is in the urban growth boundary. And we had to do that once before, so Jody has a template that we've used. So next month it'll be an ordinance, but if you guys wouldn't mind making an motion and approving it tonight, that'll save us from wondering.
You want a motion now, Mayor?
Yes, please.
I make a motion that we approve Rebecca Moore for Planning Commission.
Councilor
Second.
Pagano. Councilor McGilvery seconded.
Councilor McGilvery's the second.
Awesome. I'm going to go straight to the question, starting with Councilor McGilvery.
Aye.
Councilor Madison.
Aye.
Councilor Bradley.
Aye.
Councilor Pagano.
Aye.
4-0. So we will have an ordinance next month, and if anything happens for training or getting together, Administrator Fritz will contact you. Or Anthony Vera, I think, is also helping with some planning stuff. So Thank you very much. I appreciate your time. You can stick around if you want, or you can go on and take care of your kids.
That's what I'm going to do. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Great. Okay. Next up is the consent calendar. If there's no suggestions for changes, then just a motion to approve.
Okay, then I move that the event calendar stand as read.
Motion by Councilor McGilvery. Is there a second?
Councilor Bradley will second.
Awesome. All right. I don't think there's any discussion, so I'll go to the question. Councilor McGilvery.
Aye.
Councilor Madison.
Aye.
Councilor Bradley.
Aye.
Councilor Pagano.
Aye.
Passes 4-0. All right. Next up, citizens' comments. Does anybody have a citizen's comment? Deb Blair is new. I didn't ask you. Allowed to talk. Okay. Deb, I'm going to ask you to unmute in case you wanted to speak. Okay. Hearing none, we will move on. We have no public hearings. We have no citizen requested agenda items, no public contracts, and no ordinances resolutions. So we're all the way down to number 10. Miscellaneous, discussion about short-term vacation rental code amendments and discussion. Now we have two council members that were not on the council when this conversation started. So it's almost like a brand new discussion in some ways, and we've had a year behind us to kind of think about it for the rest of us. So it could be a good discussion. Would somebody like to start, or would you like to introduce it, Administrator Fritz?
Yes, thank you. Okay, so as the mayor had said, we had discussed this previously. It originally started in the summer of 2019, And I always, for the newer folks, I always, in the agenda packet, if it's something that we've discussed previously, I always put the prior council report in there so you kind of have the history. This one, because it had been a year since we discussed it, I actually also put in the transcript of the last discussion that we had had on it so that you could read exactly what was discussed. In the report, I had said that there was a couple of items that I was, in February, I was tasked with contacting legal counsel about, and then in March, that's when COVID started. So I did actually talk to the attorney about those couple of items. And then, Madam Mayor, if you would like me to go over what he said, or do you want to wait, or what would you like me to do?
Why don't you go over it, that way everybody's on the same page?
Okay, so one of the things that was, the attorney had taken the suggestions that then Councilor Kaufman had kind of put forward about ideas that we could put into motion in the zoning code. Right now, if there's a vacation rental in a commercial zone, it's an outright use. They do have to register as a vacation rental operator, collect the tax, remit the tax. And then also anybody that has a rental, whether it's a vacation rental or otherwise, has to have a business license. So, so the ones in the commercial zones are not really regulated by the zoning code. If people are in a residential zone and they would like to turn their dwelling into a vacation rental, they have to go through a conditional use process. And so, so one of the ideas that was initially proposed is that because it's an outright use in the commercial zone, and there is a lot of actual houses that are in commercial zones, so it's not like a huge limiting factor. But we had talked about, okay, for the houses that require conditional use permits, limiting the total number at any given time to 10. Now, when the attorney had put together the draft language, he thought that that meant 10 in each of our residential zones, but we meant just 10 altogether because we have 1, 2, and 3 residential zones. So that's a clarification that it would be 10 total in the residential zone. And then there was a question about limiting the number of time, like if it was less than X amount of time, then you had the possibility of maybe losing your ability to be a vacation rental in those residential zones. So so the attorney's suggestion was, and I actually think this is a good idea because this is something that staff has been thinking about for a while anyway. Our business license code, it just does business licenses. We don't really differentiate between types of businesses, and we kind of did that on the mobile food unit, which is good. But he suggested that we have like a separate maybe couple of items within the business license code where we say, okay, if you're a vacation rental operator, this is what you need to do. And it wouldn't be necessarily that there would be additional stuff. It's just, you know, it just differentiates that you have a vacation rental business license. So that way we can track it easier in the accounting program. If we would know at any given time how many there were. And he said, his suggestion was, whatever our number is currently, like I put a list in there. Now, some of those are long-term rentals right now, so I really need to get down to the brass tacks on which are actual operating vacation rentals. But let me just throw a number out there and say 14. Okay, so we have 14 operating in the residential zone. He recommended that we start out in our business code saying that there can only ever be 14 vacation rental business licenses at any given time. And then as attrition comes by, like as the house closes, then the council says, okay, now it's going to be 11. Now it's going to be, now it's going to be 13, 12, and then get down to whatever number the council wants it to be. And we were talking about that 10 number. So as one closes, we would amend it and say, okay, there's only ever going to be this many. And then the reverse can happen. If we decide that maybe 10 is not enough, you can put it back up again and say, okay, there's 12 licenses at any given time. And I thought that was good because then it it captures who we have now, but it doesn't like penalize somebody, and we can't really in land use wise make things retroactive. So we couldn't like take 4 of them and say, okay, now you have to stop operating. We can when they quit operating, but we can't tell them to stop operating. So I thought that was a good kind of middle ground. So he could propose like a paragraph or 2 that could be added quite easily to the business license code. He said that he thought it was Lincoln City that has something similar to that. So that would be a real easy fix. And then the other one had to do with like number of days. Like you have to operate so many days in a year to be considered valid. And that could be also one of the criteria, and that could be put into the zoning code where like one city, I can't remember if it was Talent, anyway, one of them said that, okay, yeah, you can have a vacation rental, but for 200 days of the year, it has to be your, you know, you have to be there, like, you know, like a timeshare or whatever. Councilor Kaufman at the time had thrown out a number, and I'm sorry, I don't remember what it was now, but we could put that in there as well, that in order to qualify as a vacation rental, you need to have X amount of days as a rental, you know, and you get to decide. That the attorney said that's a policy decision up to the council. Could be 30 days, could be 60 days, could be 100 days, you know, whatever the council decides as what is considered to be an operating level in order to keep your permit active. And I like that because I have a real hard time getting the vacation rental operators to report their occupancy, because I think they think it's like busy work and it's, you know, just a big government asking. They don't understand that we use those occupancy totals for statistical reasons. The hotels report it because they do it themselves. They want to know what their occupancy is, but the vacation rental operators don't really. So I always have to contact them and say, okay, how many times did you rent it? Well, if they have to keep track of it, then that would also help in reporting. So those were the 2 things that were I was asked to talk to the attorney about, and I am done. So.
Thank you, Administrator Fritz. And before I go to the council, I wanted to ask, you put a nice little list together in the packet. It's on page 32. And I'm not sure that I understood the categories. You have houses in the commercial zone, houses in the residential zone, and then registered vacation rentals inside of the city limits as of a year ago. Are you showing us the difference?
Yes.
Okay.
On the bottom were the ones, that was the list that I had provided to you last year. I didn't differentiate last year whether they were in a commercial or residential, but as we had that discussion at the meeting in February about where are they in the commercial, where are they in the residential, I identified those. So the upper list are the houses, the top list, and you can see almost all of them are down at Sebastian Shores. Just virtually all of the houses down there are operating as vacation rentals, which is fine. That was kind of what we had intended when that development was approved, that it was going to be like a timeshare kind of thing. So it's doing its thing. The non-Sebastian Shores commercials ones, there's just 4, and I identified a couple that we picked up on our latest sweep, and actually the Grumpy Gnome, I talked to the person that manages that. It's actually a long-term rental right now. It is listed on the vacation rental site, but it's not available to rent. It's long-term. So that one technically, while I found it in the sweep, is not actually a vacation rental right now. And there's a couple of other ones that the color didn't come out very good, at least it didn't on my printed version. There's a couple that were recently approved that have not started operating yet. So they are on the list, but they aren't technically doing any business at this time. So that was why I just wanted to show everybody what these are the total number that we have. And we did have quite an increase we processed more conditional use permits for vacation rentals in the last 12 months than I think I've ever processed, ever.
Yeah, because according to this, we had 30 in January of 2020, and now we have 44. And three of those are not permitted.
Right.
That's a pretty big jump in 1 year. So, okay.
I think it was because they saw that people, because of COVID, were wanting to stay in, and we'll get to that later on in the evening, talking about our occupancy. I think that even though we weren't supposed to be traveling, people were traveling. But I think that was the thing, is that people were deciding to stay in homes rather than staying at hotels. That's what I attribute it to.
Okay. So, council roundtable discussion. How about we start with Councilor McGilvery?
I was not into this last year, and I honestly would prefer just to listen for the moment. Thank you.
You got it. We'll come back around. Councilor Madison.
I'm going to pass for now.
Councilor Bradley.
I'd like to listen like Councilor McGilvery and kind of educate myself on it first. I have some
Okay.
initial opinions, but I want to gather more information because those may or may not be wrong.
Councilor Pagano.
I had a question on our exceptions portion. How come we're exceptioning out if they're over 3,500 square feet or 3,500 or more?
The suggestion was because those are probably not going to be good long-term rentals anyway.
But shouldn't we want to count them anyway so we can keep them down lower for, well, if we have our max set at 10, if we get down to 10, I would think we would want those to count so they would actually, we could start getting more long-term rentals.
Council's choice. Good argument.
Yeah, just for clarification, this is totally what you guys, this is your policy decision. There's nothing, these are all just, this was suggestions from Councilor Kaufman last year that was the attorney to be reviewed. So yeah, so any discussion that you want to have on these points is all good.
Okay.
Anything else, Councilor Pagano?
I don't believe so. I like the two suggestions that were the very first ones that Administrator Fritz was talking about. I'd like those in there, and I would like to address the square footage. I think that there shouldn't be a limit on square footage to exclude.
You always have great suggestions.
Well, thank you.
Okay. Councilor Campbell's going to be silent tonight. I'm going to come back to Councilor McGilvery. I know you don't want to make a decision tonight, but this is for discussion. Would you like to continue discussing this? And are we heading in the right direction, or should we stop, in your opinion?
Wow, I feel kind of on the spot.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
I guess because I wasn't involved with this last year and not even aware that this was up for discussion at all. And I'm wondering where we came up with the arbitrary limit of 10 and why, if this is a community for tourists, for the most part, are we limiting so strictly? And I guess that's my first question. Why?
I can answer that.
Where'd you come up with that? Yeah.
The discussion came up that our housing crisis is partly because our regular rentals are turning into vacation rentals. When the market goes up and people are traveling more, people have money to spend, then people want to change their long-term rentals into vacation rentals.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes away our housing stock. In theory. I don't know if that's true in practice. But then the second thing was we had to start from somewhere, so I put together a draft. And so all of that can be changed, modified, liked, disliked, but we had to start with something. So that's where the arbitrary number of 10 came from. It's literally arbitrary. And I think what the attorney suggested is that we start with a number close to what we have now, over or right at, and then lower it if we want to go lower. So.
And at that time you had 14, is that correct?
Well, that was just a figure I threw out there.
Okay.
Looks like right now we have 21 operating in a residential zone. 3 of which don't have a two of which that don't have a license.
Hmm.
So, or a conditional use permit. So
Mhm.
I'm guessing that would mean that the number would have to start at 21 or higher.
Might give you a hint as to what the need is.
Oh, and there's another little tool for that. Administrator Fritz had emailed us on the 10th, the vacation rental TLT, or all the TLT reports, which is transient lodging tax reports. And
Mhm.
vacation rental occupancy was 49% last year, up from 37% the year before. And they average under 50%.
Question on that stat.
Mhm.
Does that include, because I know we have some managers who are able to during certain times of year, sometimes they're using them as long-term. Does that 49% include when they're using them as a long-term device, or is it just when it's being used as a vacation rental? Just
I'll
to
let
make sure.
Administrator Fritz answer that.
Only when they're as a vacation rental. Like I said, when I contacted the one property manager about the one that I had just discovered, she said it's okay because that one actually is a long-term rental and has been for a while. So some of them come and go, and I'm aware of them. Like, you know, it seems like in the summertime they have them more as vacation rentals. Although Mayor Kaufman said something that there was some new law that had passed that maybe that's probably not going to happen as much anymore, maybe, because there was, you know better, Mayor, what that law was.
Oh, no,
Yeah,
I just asked because that one I happen to know because I've done repair work on it, that sometimes it had been vacation rental. It had been used mostly as long-term.
Yeah, yeah. So,
Yeah, there was
which
a-
is good. When I find them and I see that they're operating and I don't have them registered, it's kind of, you know, annoying. So, but it's kind of good to find out that, oh, okay, they are long-term, so that's fine, so.
Yeah, there was a bill that passed a couple years ago called Senate Bill 608, and basically you cannot kick somebody out of a rental to use it for a vacation rental. So if you have, in the past, because I used to do this kind of management, I don't anymore, you know, in October, November, you give somebody a 6-month lease, they would be out before the vacation season. Well, now you have to renew at the same terms that you gave them within the rent control bill. So if you gave them a 6 months lease, you have to offer them a 6-month renewal. You can't say it ends on that date period. So it's going to make it very difficult for people to maneuver that if somebody decides they don't want to leave. Doesn't mean people won't try. Cool. Good discussion so far. Let's go back to Councilor Madison. Did you have any comments now? Do you think we should keep working on it?
Well, I thought I understood that all of the homes down in Viscano and Sebastian Shores, I thought those weren't eligible for vacation rental. And do they have like a homeowners association there? And is that the rule? And from what I recall, that is the rule, but they kind of don't follow it. Is that right?
No, there's no limitation on vacation rentals in Mosquito Court that I know of.
So they all can be?
Yes, they all can be.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, that zone is, it's actually commercial zone, and when the development was approved, that was kind of the idea in the beginning, was that they were gonna be like timeshares. And they were never, although the state, yeah, that's a long story, but at any rate, it was never designed that they would be like, you know, that people would buy them to live there year round. The idea when they originally designed it was that they would be like second homes that people could come to, and then they would all be in a rental pool. I think originally they were talking about maybe having one person be the manager of the pool, and I don't know that ever happened. But that was kind of the intent, and that's what they've always done. But it's zone commercial, so they don't have to, other than registering as vacation rentals, they don't have to go through any other process with the city.
One of the other things that I noticed in section 10 is it says 1 off-street parking space will be provided for each bedroom in the unit, but in no event shall be less than 2 spaces be provided. So are you saying that at least 2 spaces on the street would be sufficient for parking?
Have to be off-street parking. So like, if it's a one-bedroom house, if you read it first off, it says you have to have 1 per bedroom. So if it's just a one-bedroom house, then theoretically you only have to have 1 parking space. But the code goes on to say, but in no event shall there be less than 2.
Okay.
So each house has to have at least 2, but they have to be off-street. And we've actually been putting that as a condition of approval now, even though the parking code says that. For the newer conditional use permits, we've actually been making that a condition of approval because we've had complaints of where somebody will rent the house and then they have like 4 or 5 people parking in the street, and then the people that live there don't have anywhere to park. So, so we've been adding that, and that seems to have helped a little bit. It's not a huge problem, but because it was a small problem, we added that in.
Anything else, Counselor Madison?
No, thank you.
Should we keep having this discussion?
You know, maybe for the new counselors to maybe revisit the materials. And I don't know, what do you think, Counselor Pagano? Do you think that we should give a little more time for them to kind of absorb what this looks like, and maybe from a different perspective as a counselor, it might make more sense?
Yeah. I definitely think it's something we need to keep considering and talking about. I think it's an issue still. So I do have one clarifying, well, kind of a question, I guess, to see if I'm on the right path. In our 1R, 2R, 3R zones, are we doing 10 per zone, or are we doing 10 total in all of those zones?
The attorney's draft was 10 each.
Okay, so we're
The
basically up to
original-
30.
The original was going to be just 10 in the residential, but now that we have 21, we may need to change it. I don't know that it matters if it's 1, 2, or 3R. It's the total that matters, right?
Well, see, I like the idea of doing 10 each, because we're not really we're limiting it still, but we're, depending on where your zone lays, you're going to be, you might qualify, you might not, depends on how many are in there, but we're still setting up for at least 30 units.
Do we have an idea of how many homes are in each zone?
I was just going to say, what I can do after the meeting is, I know where all these houses are located, so I can see what if it's 1, 2, or 3, and then keep in mind that kind of like simultaneous to this discussion, we are also going to start, now that we have a full planning commission, working on the stuff that the housing study identified. So some of those zoning designations are going to change a little bit. And so this is a good discussion to have at the same time, because we can incorporate that in as well. So just keep in mind that 1, 2, and 3 is likely to change in the next 12 months to reflect what the housing study recommendations were. And that work will start happening with the Planning Commission probably next month. And then I'm hoping to have something for the council to consider by June. So, and I say hoping, so. But we can incorporate, you know, that how many are in what zone and were we talking about renaming some of these zones? Because their suggestion was, you know, kind of having just like one overarching zone that allows for different things. So I don't know if I got way off track there, sorry. I'll let you know how during these zones.
Okay, so I have a suggestion, and then I'll go to Counselor Madison. Do we want to do like a workshop maybe before the next meeting? Like maybe the first 30 minutes of the meeting would be a workshop just to chew on this, and then maybe we could have a public hearing for people to give us input during the meeting. What do you guys think of that?
I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we're there yet.
Too soon?
Yeah.
Too
If
soon
we
for a
have a
workshop or
workshop-
too soon for a public hearing?
Both.
Okay.
Because we have, I think we already have a workshop scheduled for March already.
We have an extra meeting for a workshop. I'm suggesting just the first 30 minutes of the next council meeting would be the workshop.
Oh, I see. Okay, so like for April, you mean?
Yeah, for April's. So it would be the first 30 minutes would be scheduled as a workshop, and then the meeting would start. We used to do it that way.
They've seen better days.
It sounds reasonable.
You
Okay.
guys like that idea?
And that'll give me time to talk to the attorney and have him incorporate the stuff that we discussed this week, and then have another draft for you.
Somebody's got some background noise, but I'm not sure who. Councilor Madison, you have the floor.
The only thing that I thought maybe we should think about for the next time we revisit this topic is, you know, what's manageable in an R1 is not the same as what's manageable in an R3. And so we may have a little more leniency in an R3 to where like for instance, the parking may not be an issue, but in R1 it really might, especially with some of our smaller streets. You know, and even with the street that's going up to the school where there's no parking during the school zone, you know, during school hours. And so probably really need to make sure that we dive into that pretty good.
That's an excellent point. Excellent point.
Administrator Fritz, is there a way to maybe give a visual of where those zones are?
Yes.
For the next meeting? Okay.
I will. What I planned on doing was doing because most of them are in Gold Beach proper. There's two out in Hunter Creek, but
Right.
most of them are in Gold Beach proper. So I'll do a GIS map. I can do the zoning layers and then do target points for where the houses are currently. And that way we can see it visually.
Okay. Is there anything else you would want for a next meeting before we start chewing on it in a workshop? If you think of anything in the interim, you can shoot an email to or give a call to Administrator Fritz. Okay, let's move on. Update from Mayor on Council Rules Revision. I did get some work done with it with Christy Monson, our attorney, but there's a couple more things that need to be worked on before I give it back to you. So I'm going to postpone it till April. So you can check that off the list for tonight. And then discuss budget goals for the council priorities before the administrator does budget prep. And so that's kind of a big question, especially for the two counselors that have never seen a budget before. But is there anything the city's not doing now that you would like to be considered for the next budget? One of the discussions we had let's see, did we actually have that discussion? One of the ideas that came up, I think it was in a brainstorming session, was possibly if the administrator was wearing so many hats, does she need to hire somebody to help take over some of those responsibilities, and do we need to budget for that? So that was one of the questions as an example. I will start with, I'm not going to start with Councilor McGilvery because I already put her on the spot once. I will start with Councilor Madison.
Okay, so ideas for topics in general is what we're looking at right now.
Is there anything that you want to make sure we budget for, or anything you want the administrator to consider to kind of, so the council can give her direction as she drafts it? We usually only do it once the budget starts, and then it might be, oh, you got to find money. It's a lot easier to find it before you put it on paper.
Right. Well, I definitely think it would be great if we could kind of explore what it would take to get the administrator some assistance, because that's a job that she works well into the evening, as you know, and weekends, always on call. Be nice for her to take a vacation without feeling like she's coming back to a hot mess, even though she has great staff. And you know, the other thing too is I would wonder if maybe we could have a discussion more in detail about the gas tax. I've been working on something similar at the county. And then the other thing I wondered is if maybe even at a workshop, we could have the discussion of revisiting having a camp host. And even though it may not be budgeted financially, there would be some expenses there. You know, there might not be a pay for it, but there may be some expenses to be covered there that I'm hoping that we can at least talk about.
Now, when you say campus, do you mean Buffington Park?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Bradley?
Having only been here a few months, seeing how much Administrator Fritz does, if we can explore to see if there's room in the budget to bring her an assistant, I think that would be time well spent. The only other one I had mentioned before, but I don't think that's necessarily city money. It was asking the Administrator Fritz to see if there's ways sidewalks on 101, but that's not. When I asked that, I wasn't envisioning that being a city expense.
Thank you, sir. Let's see, Counselor Pagano?
I don't really have a lot. Do we? So I know last year in our budget we cut back on the visitor center quite a bit. Do we still see that as being kind of I don't see that reopening anytime soon. Do we? I don't know.
No,
Is that where we need to look at putting money into?
We just, in fact, Superintendent Newdall did it for me because I was not feeling well the other day. We did just have the walkthrough for the structural changes that were made to the inside. And while I have seen them, I had Mr. Newdall, look like with the construction eye to make sure that things were done the way that they should have been. So that's done, so that's great. However, I think until vaccines are more readily available, I still do not feel, from a HR standpoint, I don't feel comfortable having folks in that facility yet, because that's the one place I know in the city offices where people from out of town are coming. So
Right.
that's the one place I know cooties will be. So I'm hoping that by summertime, because the staff had just recently asked me that too, and I said it's really going to be dependent on what happens with the vaccine. And who would have thought here we would be a year later and we were still dealing with this. So so I don't know. I think that maybe in another month's time, when we can see now that the third vaccine has just been approved, that maybe we'll start getting more of it down here. But short answers is I don't know. So.
Okay.
And thank you for asking, Councilor Pagano.
Other than that, I don't see. I don't see anywhere really we should be putting more funds than other. I don't see any changes. I think we're doing a pretty good job there. That was just one spot that I was thinking, since we did cut back, if that was something we needed to look at re-putting money into, but kind of play it by ear, it sounds like.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Okay, and Counselor McGilvery, I'm going to ask you to unmute because I muted you earlier.
There we go. Okay. Yeah, I'm thinking in terms of the visitor center and knowing how many people it serves. I know we have to hold our horses with reopening that. We have to wait. We have to make sure that, again, vaccines have been readily available and that people are safe coming through there and that our staff is safe there. But I wouldn't like to see us take that as a line item and move it away from the budget and not be prepared to reopen that when the time comes. And then when the time comes, we say, oh, geez, I'm sorry, we don't have the money anymore. That, to me, doesn't work very well. And then, yes, I think we do need to seriously consider some kind of assistance for Jody, something that gives her a break from time to time. In that way lies madness, Jody. So, and that's really all I know about it right at the moment, and I can't say anything more constructive yet.
Great, thank you. One of the things I I was going to suggest, and right on along the lines with the visitor center, is that money is restricted by ordinance and also by the state what we can do with it. And we probably will have money that we didn't spend this year because you've had good revenue. And I'm wondering if we shouldn't just put that into the building fund, reserve fund, because I know there's a lot of stuff that needs to be done down there, even just looking at the pavement. It might be a good place to put it. And I see Director Noodle shaking his head big time.
He likes that idea.
He and I might share some conservative traits. So that was what I was thinking. I also wanted to think about forecasting. Our general revenue predominantly goes towards the police department, and I'm always concerned we're not going to have enough money to fund that. But every time I've asked, everybody said that's one of our highest priorities. So I don't know if you can do some analysis about how long can we sustain without having to come up with some new money to do that. That might not be a this year project. It might be a next year project, but something to keep on our head, because at some point we're not going to have enough money because our revenue doesn't go up. And Councilor Pagano couldn't explain all of that to us someday, but it would put us to sleep. Oregon property tax is very confusing. Is there any anything new you would like to see this year, in the next year, or they're coming soon? I don't think, other than the position possibly to help Jody, that anybody mentioned anything.
First off, I want to say thank you, everyone. You need to understand that part of it is just that I'm a workaholic and I would be here anyway, but so I don't want you to think that, the evil city makes me, stay here day and night. It's kind of self-imposed, but there are certain things that as time has gone on that I would actually like to shed to someone else. But just know that. I mean, I appreciate that you guys are saying this, but also part of it is just that I just do that because that's, the way I roll. But know that I do have one staff member that's going to be retiring shortly. And usually when that happens, I do a reorganization in the front office. We kind of redistribute duties. We decide who wants to do what. Things are a little bit different with COVID, and I don't know that when it finally is over. I was talking to one of my assistants the other day about it, that the way we do business is going to be different after this is over because of the things that have happened in the past year. In the beginning, when we thought it was only going to last for a couple of months, everyone was talking about getting back to normal. But now that it's gone on so long and things have changed so much, like just us having meetings like this, it's just things are different. And so that's one of the discussions that I will be having with my staff before Margaret retires, so that we can decide who wants to do what. There's one of my staff members that I actually, not because of this discussion, but just I was thinking today that I intend to give a lot more responsibility to, and so that position will be changing. So it's a good time to start thinking about things, but I just want you to know that things will look a little bit different, not only after COVID, but just because somebody's going to be retiring. So the front office will be reorganized. So anyway, thank you. I appreciate that you all you're very nice and kind. Thank you.
Well, if Councilor Campbell were here, she would say it's also risk management from our point of view, that we've got so much on one person's shoulders.
I think Councilor Madison had her hand up there.
Councilor Madison?
Well, I just wanted to say ask, because of COVID, I know a lot of budgets have changed. Like there's a lot of travel funds that weren't used and a lot of conference fees that pretty much were almost free online because of COVID. But are there expenses that we've had to spend money on that weren't budgeted, Jody, that you feel that we could prepare for in the event that something like this happens in the future, even if it's not, a pandemic, but it happens to be something that impacts the way that we're able to do business?
That's a really good question. Thank you, Councilor Madison. I think the short answer is yes, because fortunately, knock on wood for us, we had switched to the cloud-based version of the accounting and utility management software that we used a couple of years back, and that was more due to weather, because we used to have the server here, and I don't have really great, we don't have on-staff IT. We have really great IT contracts, but what led to it was we had a electrical outage that fried the server, and I physically had to drive it to Medford to get a new one. And at that point, it was like, okay, we can't do this anymore. So we did switch to the internet-based version, which was great. So when COVID hit, we already were there, so that was good. And I certainly hadn't ever imagined anything like that happening. But one of the things that this has helped me realize is that there is more IT stuff that I would like to talk to. Coos Curry does our IT like they do for the county. I do want to talk to Daniel about, what does he think that we need to do better and more of for the future? Because I think that's one of the things I was talking about, that after COVID goes away, I think, at least for me, unless I'm made to go to Salem, I am not driving there anymore. This year has proven that we can all meet remotely, and I don't need to drive 10 hours round trip. Director Newdall and I, we had to go to this thing in Albany for the water intake loan, and 3 of us had to go up there and talk before the IFA committee, and we had to. It was like our loan would not be considered if we didn't go there in person. And so that was a huge expense to a city our size. So that's one of the fortunate things that's come out of this, is that now we can push back on the state and say, no, we know that we can do this remotely now. It's just, how can we do it better? And I know that there are things that that we can do here at City Hall to make things easier and better. So yeah, that's a really great question, Councilor Madison. And I was just thinking IT-wise, but I know that there's probably things in Mr. Newdall's department and in our other city departments that we can do. Like in the police department, we've gone to doing stuff remotely from the cars, like you see on TV. We didn't have that option before, but because we did get some money from the feds, we were able to put some, I don't know exactly how they work, so don't ask. But the officers can do stuff from their cars remotely now that was not possible before. So we are making those changes, but I think there's more things that we can do in anticipation of, I don't want to say something like this happening again, but we all know that we're in a remote area and we can be cut off at any time. And so that's one of the things I was going to talk to you with Mr. Newdall and other department heads about. What has this year taught us, and is there things that we can do better and differently? And definitely budget time is when we want to talk about that. Will's shaking his head, yeah.
Great. All right. I don't want to talk about this forever. So unless somebody has something that's just burning to say, we will move on. Did you get enough information, Administrator Fritz?
Yeah, thank you.
And
Those are
if
all
you need to follow up, you know who to contact. Okay.
Yep.
Cool.
Thank you.
So next up is review Q2 financials, which is October through December of 2020. I did read through it, and I wanted to mention that I liked your summary, Administrator Fritz. That was really helpful. Your questions that might be asked in advance.
And can I just say that was questions that Mayor Kaufman will ask in advance?
I actually think
that.
I think that most new people are going to wonder what all this is. All of them I pretty much knew already because I've asked you 1,000 times before. But yeah, so I'm going to let you guys open up your own mic, and if you have any questions or you want to discuss anything about the fiscals, financials, please do so now. Oh, don't tell me all your eyes went back in your head.
Know that at any time, it doesn't have to be at a council meeting time, it doesn't have to be, you can email or call me anytime about questions about expenditures, revenues, that's, you know, that is information that is totally available to you. And I don't want you to, if you ever have questions, I want to make sure that you completely understand where the city's money comes from and where it goes. So don't ever feel like you have to wait for a council meeting to ask those questions.
Councilor McGilvery, did you have something?
No.
Oh, okay. Okay. So if nobody else is going to ask a question, I'm going to just ask a, I don't think it's really a question, it's more pointing out a couple things. On the revenues, the room tax, if I'm reading this correctly, is up about 89%. And the marijuana tax is up 1,200%. And I think you figured that out, that's $450,000 worth of marijuana was sold in a quarter out of 2 stores.
Yeah, I mean, we have a 3% city tax, and if the state is remitting $14,000 to us in a quarter, that's a lot of weed. That's a lot of weed.
So that's a pretty good industry.
A lot more than I would have thought.
That's some high-paying cash wages.
Maybe some other levels of government should be looking at that.
The other thing that I saw, I thought was optimistic is you're pretty much right on for business licenses. So businesses are not paying their business license because they're having so much pain in the industry. So that's a good sign. I thought we'd see a down on that. Either people closed or just couldn't pay or wouldn't pay.
Well, I don't know that we're actually going to see that until about May, because the billing only goes out in May, so it hasn't gone out for this year. So we're not going to know until like June or July what businesses shut for good because of COVID. We haven't had a whole lot of assessments from the May 20, so I guess that's good.
Yeah, you've collected 32,000 of 32,880, so that's pretty good. It's almost 100%.
No, we haven't collected any. That's why it's a negative.
Oh, you collected it all last year. Okay. I read it wrong. See?
Yeah. Yeah, we haven't collected any of it yet because it doesn't get billed until May. The reason why it shows as a negative revenue of 880 is those are adjustments. Those are businesses that we billed them in FY 1920, and then when June came around, they were no longer in business, or you know, for whatever reason, they didn't want to renew their business license. Generally, it's that they're no longer doing business.
Okay. On page 10, which is the water utility fund.
Yes.
If I'm reading it correctly, you had a lot of systems development charges.
That is the material install and labor. If you look in Fund 64, which is, hang on just a sec. On page 21, we have sold $27,000 worth of new hookups this year, and a water hookup, a water SPC is $2,800. So you can do the math. I mean, Superintendent Newdahl can speak to it better than I can because I just see the paperwork portion of it. But they are doing all kinds of installs right now, and so in the water fund, that $9,343, that represents the extra labor that it costs to install the services. When they buy a system development, and I'm giving you more information than you want to know, I'm sorry, but when somebody pays for a brand new hookup, they get $300 of materials and installation, and that includes like what the crew needs to like install it. That's the valves and all that go into the ground. If they have to do any special digging. Okay, so then that $9,300 represents over and above the $300. Sometimes it doesn't cost that much to do an install. Sometimes they have to do extra digging, you know, whatever. But I think probably, and he can speak to this better than me, but I think we probably sold more water hookups this year than we ever have in a year, in 1 year.
So that's a sign that we're growing.
Yeah, oh yeah, that's a good thing.
Okay.
So, and the reason why we sold more water than sewer is because of the development across the river, the one that's behind the assisted living. So that represents a goodly portion of it because we serve water there, but not sewer. So if you were comparing, like, why did we have more water than we had sewer, that's why. Because most of the, and then we had either 2 or 3 water services down in Roque Shores, which is also across the river. So
My next question is on the water sales. If I'm reading this correctly, we sold a lot more than we expected, especially outside water sales.
outside water sales, yes, we're at 71% of budget. So
That's. Do you think people are just home and using more?
well, that's outside. So there are a couple of larger, you know, Jots Resort is considered outside water. The condos over there, I would say yes, people are home more. And then the flip side is that even though people are not supposed to be traveling, they were traveling. So probably more people staying at Jots Resort and in the condominiums.
When there's a lot of vacation rentals in Rogue Shores.
Yeah.
So, okay, good. 14. That's a dumb question. Page 15. Bottom line on the community promotion fund. Can you tell me what that means?
Page 15 on the bottom.
The net community promotion fund, 45, 61%.
It means that we're, like if you look in column number 2 for the current year actual, okay, our revenue that we took in as of December 30 was over $217,000. That's at half a year. And then our expenditures were only $85,000. So that's why it's showing the 4,561% is that we are way over revenue to expenditure.
Okay, so my thought was correct. If you do a supplemental budget, we may want to put a chunk into the building fund.
And yeah.
Or we could pay back some of the loan.
That was going to be my second.
Yeah.
Or we both.
Or both, yeah. So that might be so for those of you that aren't aware, that there was an audit several years ago where the fund overspent, and so we loaned them the money to correct it, and so they're paying it back on a long-term basis. And then that was all my questions. Now, does anybody have a question now that you can hear how dumb the questions can be? I know financials are never any fun, but it is important to look at them from time to time and keep everybody on. What was that, Administrator Fritz?
Did you have any questions about the interfund loan thing? Like I said, I tried to keep it simple, but then after I did it, I thought it doesn't look.
You know, it made sense to me, but I'm not sure it made sense to anybody else because I'm kind of the one that bugged you to do it for quite a long time.
I would say just look at page 2. That kind of condenses it down. Page 1 has all of the information about who the fund was between, when it started, how long it was. But if you want to just know, okay, what's the loan receivables, go to page 2. So basically, we have 5 interfund loans currently. Most of them are with the sewer reserve because that's the fund that has the most money. And when we say, why do we have interfund loans? One was to pay off a loan that we had with the state that had a higher interest rate than what we could give ourselves. And 2, there are projects that, or things that needed to be purchased, like the Grizzly Mountain Road repair. The street fund didn't have enough money to do that, so the sewer reserve loaned them the money. But this is just like at the bank, we have to pay ourselves back, but we get our own interest then, because the money for the sewer reserve just sitting at Umpqua Bank is not earning us that much money. So if we loan the money to ourselves, not only do we not have to, I mean, we wouldn't go out and get a commercial loan anyway, that wouldn't be the thing, but at least it's taking our city money and having it work for ourselves, where right now, if it were just sitting in our savings account at the bank, it wouldn't be earning us anything.
So a little history, we're required to have a pretty good size reserve fund for sewer because we have a very big size loan for the sewer. So that's why we have to have it, but nothing in the loan document says we can't use it for things. So we're using it as a loan to ourselves to save us money elsewhere and make money for that fund. It's been a really good program for the city. I like seeing the total, so we know that the reserve fund has that much extra that's outstanding that'll eventually come back. And we guarantee our own loans. So does anybody have any questions about it? Okay. Hearing none, we will move on to the next item. Mayor and council member comments. No, city administrator's report.
Okay, and unfortunately, I do not have the January's done like it says in the budget because I was gone most of that last week sick. So, so the mayor asked if I would just briefly go over the through December 20th TLT reports that I had emailed to everybody on the 10th of February. And you don't have to pull it up. I was just going to hit some of the high points. Obviously, the foot traffic. I keep track of certain things for those that are newer. I keep track of how much revenue comes in for the lodging tax. I keep track of occupancy. A couple of years back, I spread it out where we used to just track occupancy all over. I mean, like all of the different occupancy types. But a couple of years back, I broke it out between motels, vacation rentals, and RV parks. So that way we could see, like, you know, are people staying in one place more than another, and what those occupancies are. And then we also track the rainfall. Ron, our wastewater plant operator, he has to keep track of the rainfall for his DEQ reporting. And so at the end of the month, he just reports to me what our rainfall is because, you know, when you look at these reports year to year, you're like, oh, wow, why did, you know, February of this year have so much more than February of last year? Well, what started it was when we had a big storm event, and it was like, you know what, we need to track that in the motel stuff so that we can see if there is a downturn, like a trend. Why do we have fewer people in that month, in that year? And so I try to kind of like if there's anything going on, like when the fires were going on, when the Hooskanagan slide was there, just different things. And so, so overall, our occupancy for the year, even though the visitor center wasn't open at all, and we did no advertising. We did no, after March of last year, there was no radio advertising, there was no TV advertising. The only thing we do is just our website, and Facebook. And as I've said about 5 times tonight, even though people are not supposed to be traveling, we had the most awesome year that we've ever had, ever, which on the one hand makes me happy, but on the other hand, as a human being, makes me terribly sad. So, however, Jody, who's in charge of the finances, okay, yeah, it's a good thing, but yeah, our revenue for the fourth quarter of last year was just stupid, crazy how much money we made. And the fact that, and part of it is that in the springtime, this time of year, I'm usually traveling to shows, to wearing my promotions manager hat, you know, to lure people to come to Gold Beach. And last year we went to Canada. In fact, the weekend that COVID hit officially, we were just coming back from Canada. And yet, I look at these numbers and we've done no advertising whatsoever and had the most awesome year ever. So it's just like, part of me wants to go out and scream at people when I see their license plates and say, you know, we spend thousands of dollars every year to get you to come here. And when you're not supposed to come, that's when you come. So I'm not sure what the lesson is there. I haven't yet figured it out. The cootie person in me has not figured out what that lesson is yet. But the upside is that, as the mayor pointed out, we do have additional funds that, you know, in a good year, we bring in like $230,000. Well, by December, we were at 217. So we will have some extra money this year, especially since the expenses were lower. So that's something we'll throw out at budget time to talk about what to do with that extra money. You know, things that we can do with that. So anyway, so that's just a quick little recap, and I should be sending out the January through the end of January report sometime this week.
You hold on one second. Councilor Bradley has raised his hand.
Okay.
Just as a long-term thought, Administrator Fritz, is maybe if with those people still coming in, that means there may be better ways that we can spend our promotion money to maybe widen our market to get people here. Because it sounds like maybe people from Medford and the valleys don't really necessarily listen to our ads. So maybe just as a future thought.
Well, it's interesting that, you know, I'm sure that you've all seen that like every other car is from California, which is fine. You know, that's great. I'm glad they're coming up here. But when we do the show in San Francisco that we normally do every year, I have to sit there and explain to people, like half of them don't even know where the redwoods are. And I'm like, those are your redwoods. You got to drive through them to get to us. When I was in Canada last year, okay, it was about equal distance as far as how long it took us to get there. There were more people in Canada that knew where Gold Beach, Oregon was than people in California. And after a while, on the second day, I started saying, I'm going to tell people in California, I'm ashamed of them, that the Canadians know where we're at, but you don't. So they're coming now because we're close to them, but maybe we need to spend some more money down there now. But Canada, yeah, we don't have to spend any money up there. They know who we are.
Good. And is there anything else you want to finish up with, Administrator Fritz?
No, I'm good. Thank you. I talked too much already tonight. I have,
Okay.
sorry.
Okay.
I have.
And Councilor comments. Councilor Madison. You got to unmute.
The little touchpad on my laptop's going out, so I have to kind of, you know, I really wish I had a bunch of super exciting things to share. I know that always made Mayor Popoff happy, but I literally have nothing except for happy birthday to Councilor Bradley.
Did you happen to come up with like a huge pallet of something to give away?
Oh, yeah, but that was county business. I had a 22 pallets of PPE over 6 feet tall to move in a week. So yeah, we moved a bunch of PPE throughout the county. Our school districts were provided for. Fire departments really stepped up and took a lot of supply that helps disperse that throughout the communities, and the small businesses and nonprofits that usually need PPE know to go to the fire department, so that's really nice. Got a lot of businesses from Gold Beach to come up and grab what they need, and thankfully we were out of the church just in time. Yep. Yeah, it was very rewarding. Okay,
Great.
so that's all I have.
So you saved a lot of Gold Beach businesses money on PPE.
Yeah, I think that was the most exciting part of it is, you know, they're already struggling, and those that just really couldn't make it because they're so small. We definitely loaded some trucks and delivered when we were headed north or south. The departments really stepped up and helped me with that. So I really appreciated that. They certainly love our community, and I can't blame them.
Great. All right, Councilor Bradley.
Well, what I had is something from a conversation with a friend, just to kind of remind everybody, because during the election cycle, one of our questions was about post-catastrophe resilience as a city. And just thought I'd remind everybody this week is a personal responsibility, because it's part of what I did this weekend was stocking my pantry. Is that if you are worried about us being resilient after any sort of catastrophe, from roads out, whatever, do your part. Try to get a week, 2 weeks worth of food, water, so that way, if something does happen, you're ready. Anyway, that's it for me.
A really good point. You're only as prepared as your least prepared neighbor. Councilor Pagano.
I don't really have any updates, but I've been getting a lot of complaints, and Councilor Madison actually mentioned it earlier today, or this meeting. In regards to the no parking during school along 6th Street there, I've been getting tons of people complaining about parking right there by the church. I don't know if it's renters or what it is, but they're not paying attention to those signs, and people are complaining they have to go around and there's nowhere to go and the streets are too narrow. So is there a way we can maybe get new signs or bigger signs, or possibly start giving tickets? I don't know what the...
I'll ask the PD to, now that school's back in, I'll ask them to start patrolling down 6th Street more in the morning.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't noticed because I'm not down 6th Street very often, but I've just been getting a lot of text messages, things like that saying, can you get these people to move? Unfortunately, no, I can't. But that's all I have.
I'm guessing drop off and pickup is 4 times a day now rather than 2. So you've got buses and parents probably driving through more often. So it probably would be more. It used to be just twice a day was a big congestion, but now it's probably 4 times a day. Good point, Councilor Bogano. Councilor McGilvery.
Well, since we're talking about signage and speed limits, I'm going to put my oar in. And that is that there's a 20-mile speed limit along 11th Street, but there's no signage beyond way south of Melody Lane. And I'm wondering if it's possible to have more signage, something, because kids play up there, and they should. That's a place for them to be. And people walk their animals along there, and the curves are almost blind. And I'm wondering if it's possible to have more signage up that way to say that it's 20 miles an hour. And if that doesn't work, can we get a little more stringent? And maybe a feasibility study, if we could find out, because I know people aren't doing 20, but you know, what you know and what you can prove are 2 different things.
Right. Okay. Yep. And Superintendent Newdall is nodding his head too. So we'll talk about that this week, and we'll start with the signs. And I think that probably because that street doesn't have the ability to have sidewalks, that we could probably do some, you know, children playing, slow children playing. But that's also another enforcement thing. So I'll ask the PD to do some more. I doubt that we'll get to ticketing, but just presence. You know, that if people see the police officer,
even if we can, you know, demonstrate in some way what the speeds are that people are traveling, we can maybe reinforce that.
Okay.
But thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. That reminds me, for budgeting purposes, if staff's inclined, we probably could use another speed sign, one of those radar ones. I guess ours doesn't work anymore. And a lot of cities are putting them permanently up on different streets, but I don't know if we have the money for that kind of. We just had one that moved around again.
We're partnering with ODOT. If anybody's been north in the last year or so, when you come into Bandon, they have the flashing signs that are actual like road ODOT signs. We're going to be getting 2 of those here, and I might ask Director Newdall to unmute. Did we hear from ODOT recently? I thought that we did, or was that on someone else?
I haven't got an update on that. That was signage on 101 when they were changing around some school signs. But we have a couple items for Darren Neville from ODOT to talk about. And one of them, Councillor Bradley brought up. I've been working with them to try to get some new sidewalks on 101 prior to the overlay. And they haven't put a date on overlaying 101, but I told them I wanted to get some new ADA ramps and sidewalk replacements done. And was hitting Darren up for a grant, and so that we could get some things cleaned up. We have some 1950 sidewalks in front of the high school all the way past the fairgrounds. And so those are in pretty rough shape. They're ready for a redo.
Great. Thank you. All right. For my comments, I have the mayor's contest done by the Oregon Mayor's Association is open to grades 4th and 5th and 6th through 8. The 4th and 5th do posters, 6th through 8 do essays, and high school 9 through 12 is a digital media presentation. And I want to encourage people to submit their entries, and there'll be free prizes, and it'll be fun. The second thing, and I went ahead and submitted it in advance, if I can find it on my computer now, that this is Women's History Month. And of course, I had no idea what Women's History Month was, so now that I'm the mayor, I'm supposed to pay attention to these things. And it refers back to the 19th Amendment when women got the right to vote. And I wrote up a little history on it, but basically women did have voting rights in the colonies prior to 1776, but by 1807, after we actually became a nation, all states had banned women from voting. So there was a long process of trying to get the right to vote, which finally happened in 1918. And one of the most interesting parts of my research was there was a young man that was only 24 years old. He was a legislator in Tennessee. His name was Harry Byrne, and he was going to vote no on the amendment to the Constitution. But his mother changed his mind, and his yes vote allowed the last state we needed for a 75% ratification of the amendment. I found that very interesting. So in August of 1920, women had the right to vote. And we take that for granted today. I mean, there's 3 councilors and mayors that are female. We've always had females involved in the city of Gold Beach, pretty much government. But that wasn't always so in our nation. It used to be different. Now we worry about other things. But so I'm thankful for the people that went through that, so I didn't have to fight that fight. And I also had heard through the grapevine, but nobody sent me anything, that it's also suicide awareness for teens and self-infliction awareness. And that is a pretty serious issue in youth. And so I will mention that, even though nobody sent me a proclamation for it, that it is important to reach out to youth that are having issues, and actually anybody that's having issues. As a person that was first suicidal at 12 years old, I can certainly relate to that, want to do that, but it is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. It's better to get help than it is to take your life or to inflict injury on yourself. So with that, I will move on to citizen comments. Is there any citizens that would like to comment? You may unmute and announce yourself, and then I will give you the floor.
Cindy Myers.
Cindy Myers, would you please speak?
I wasn't sure if my comment ended up in the chat, but I wanted to be sure that Councillor Madison understood how appreciative we are for the PPE at Ellensburg Theater Company.
We did see it in the chat, but thank you for saying so.
Yeah, I didn't see that, so thank you. I'll mention real quick. There was some casting materials that the crew from Sony happened to leave for the Ellensburg Theater as well. But I'm gonna let them kind of do the big release and thing on that. But very nice people.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Oh, you know who I missed? I missed our student liaison. Did you want to say something tonight, Ms. Sadat? She's going, oh, thank you for missing me.
I'm okay.
What are you doing for school? What does it look like today?
I mean, the same as always. We're just going to school until like 12 o'clock since I'm in the AM schedule. And apparently we're going to start getting like rapid testing at the school soon.
Like COVID testing or rapid
COVID
quizzes?
testing.
COVID
testing.
testing. Okay.
I heard rumors there was an outbreak like on the football team and a couple people that were in my section of the school, the AM, but nothing from the school, so I'm not really sure.
Well, there was a pretty big outbreak in Central Curry, so I think I figured it out. It was like 0.5% tested positive in 2 weeks. That's a pretty big number. And I know there was a lot of people that didn't get tested because it's really hard to get tested in Gold Beach, unfortunately. Okay, any other citizens' comments? Hearing none. Pause a minute, Kaufman. I'm an extrovert. I'm not very good at silence. Okay, then we will, I'm not going to adjourn the meeting. I'm going to pause the meeting because we may come out of executive session and say something. But we are going to have an executive session, so I'll ask people that are citizens to leave. We do have one member from the pilot that is welcome to stay.
And I'm going to be, for the folks that don't jump off, don't be insulted, but if you don't leave in just a second.
We'll kick you off. We thank you for coming.
If we could have Mr. DeMars from the pilot stay, that would be great.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Oh, there we do have a question.
Ms. Vieira?
Yes, so you're pausing the meeting and we need to leave because of the executive session, which I completely respect. But then how do we know that you guys have come back in case whatever you discuss at the executive session, there is public
That's a really good question.
Thanks, I try.
Any suggested solution?
I don't know what your guys' is.
See, in normal life, you'd be in the hallway,
yeah,
and we would open the door and say, come in. So how do we do? Right. Is there a way to put people in a waiting room?
That's what I'm wondering, what you have there on your side of the screen.
We can make you a panelist. We can lower your hand.
I might have to research that because I don't know.
I really appreciate that question because it is something we should solve.
Okay. Yeah. No big. I just.
I don't think we'll come out of this one because I don't think there's a decision to be made. But you never know.
Yeah. Next time.
All right.
That is a good question because I don't know. So I'll have to see if yes, there's a way to make them. If you want to wait, you can. But I don't know. So note to self.
Note to self. Okay.
Thank you very much. And maybe your listserv, Administrator Fritz, would have a suggestion.
Actually, yeah, that's what I was going to do. I don't want to try to figure it out.
People that are already doing them, how do you do that?
Yeah. All right. Thanks.
All right.
You guys
Thank
have a
you.
great night.
All right. Okay.
Okay.
So,
and then, Ms. Mayor, when I will monitor to see, well, now that we have the webinar, you can't join until I let you join. So if it looks like somebody else tries to rejoin, I won't.
Okay, and we didn't get an agenda, so I'm just going to read this part at the bottom, and then is there something else on?
Get an agenda. It's page 3. It's right after the because it has the script. Right after the agenda for the
I didn't print it. That would be my problem.
Okay, so go to page
it's after
4.
the Zoom thing. There it is. All right. Okay, at the beginning of the executive, the mayor will read this. The Gold Beach City Council will now meet in executive session pursuant to ORS 192.660, subsection 2, subsection F, and subsection H, to consider written advice from legal counsel and current litigation or litigation likely to be filed. Credentialed representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend virtually the executive session. Anyone else attempting to join the meeting will be asked to leave. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report or disclose any of the discussions during executive session, except to state the general subject of the session previously announced. No decision may be made in the executive session. Call to order at 7:59 p.m.